Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. This show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative. This episode is sponsored by Police Mortgage. Police Mortgage is a full-service mortgage company dedicated to serving police officers and first responders. Founded in 2008, Police Mortgage offers a variety of mortgage products tailored to meet the needs of those who serve and protect. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and as usual, I have another great, intriguing guest. His name is Brian Townsend, and he's a former special agent from the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, as many of us know as the DEA, actually retired. I found out talking to a police officer once before that you don't say ex or former, that you say retired, because it says that that person had a very distinguished career and left on good terms. So he is a retired special agent. And he also started only 2 mg, or maybe only 2 milligrams, which we'll get into, which refers to fentanyl. And he's going to talk about his decades of first-hand experience combating drug trafficking and other public safety challenges. I can go on and on and on. But Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Ken. I appreciate the opportunity. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. Is what often happens. We already had a great conversation before I press record. Let's hope that continues or just gets better now that we are on, so to speak.
All right, that sounds good to me.
So before we get into it, is it actually only 2 mg or only 2 milligrams? How do you like people referring to your business?
Either works. I mean,
Okay.
Obviously, it's milligrams is what MG stands
Right.
for, but a lot of folks will just say 2 mg, or we will refer to the organization as only 2 mg. So
Got it. Well, before we dig into that, tell us a little bit about your DEA career. How long was it? Tell us about, your best story. Talk a little bit about your DEA experience.
Sure. So I actually started my law enforcement career in as a police officer. It was prior to DEA. I was a police officer in Joplin, Missouri for about 5 years in the 1990s. A great department, a great community. I really loved it. But my dream was the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. Spent 23 years with DEA. Some really great assignments. Started my career in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mm.
So learned a lot about local and regional organizations. Our highway system in Arkansas is interesting. So we had a lot of dope coming in from Arizona, California, Texas, just different parts. I really got a pretty good education on drug trafficking from different perspectives, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Decided to go into management, and I was transferred to Corpus Christi, Texas, and where I spent the next almost 7 years in Corpus and along the southwest border. Spent a lot of time down in the McAllen area and that area of South Texas. And that's where I really learned a lot about the border and the cartels, specifically at the time, the Gulf Cartel and the Los Zetas, but all the cartels operate the same. Went to Quantico, Virginia. This was 2016. This was my only non-enforcement time in law enforcement. I spent 4 years there. I was in charge of most in-service training, and I got to start the leadership and development training unit for the academy and for DEA's workforce. And then my last 2 years, I came back to Missouri, where I was the resident agent in charge. So I was in charge of the DEA office in Springfield, Missouri, and the 26 or so counties in Southwest Missouri that we're responsible for. So retired in 2022 and opened up my own business, went to work for an organization that supports law enforcement. And then I also opened
Nice.
up, because I don't like to sleep, apparently, then I started my own nonprofit.
Well,
But
retirement means different things to different people. For some, it's golf and fishing. For others, it's 2 new jobs.
yeah, I control my schedule, and I love that. I mean, I work for an organization, and I have to put in the hours for them, but they're very supportive, and I've been able to build curriculum and train law enforcement in the 9 states that we serve, or this organization serves. So that's great. So I'm still around law enforcement all the time. I mean, I'm not commissioned. I don't carry a badge or a gun, but I'm constantly around them, and working with them, and that's what I love to do. It's been a great career and it's been a great journey.
Nice, nice. One of the things that you just mentioned is something, and I'm paraphrasing, that it was your dream or your at least your desire to be in the DEA and to be a DEA agent. And I've had the privilege of interviewing a ton of first responders, and I've heard, hey, I had a dream of being a firefighter. Hey, I had a dream of being a cop. Hey, I had a dream of being in the FBI or Secret Service. You're the first person that ever said, I wanted to be in the DEA and that's what I wanted to do. And damn it, I got in there. So why specifically the DEA?
You know, early on in life, I saw what drugs were doing in my community, and I saw how they were impacting people very negatively, and just made a decision that I wanted to work in law enforcement, but specifically in drug enforcement. And then when I learned what the DEA was, which was in high school, I thought, yep, that's it. I grew up in Northern
Nice.
Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and
Mm-hmm.
not too far away from Quantico, where the FBI and DEA Academy is, and ultimately, I ended up working with someone whose wife. I worked with a woman whose husband, I'm sorry, worked at the FBI Academy, and he got me a tour there, and it was an FBI tour. But when I saw the DEA guys, of course, I didn't tell the FBI guys this, but I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do right there. And the internet wasn't really a thing, and so I had the idea, but I didn't really know how to go about it, and it just worked out. I became a police officer, and I hate to use the word stepping stone, but that's what it was for me. It was a
Mm-hmm.
great 5 years of learning about myself and about this career, and it really
Sure.
helped me, I think, be a little bit more effective when I did join the DEA.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, and I don't think that it's granted, I'm a civilian who's never been a first responder, but I don't think that saying that being a police officer and using it as a stepping stone is negative at all. Um
Yeah, I would have been happy there for many, many
mm,
years, but I this is my dream. This was really what I
yeah.
wanted to do. I wanted to work specifically in drug enforcement and try to make an impact in the communities to what I was seeing, or to what I continue to see, is a poison. It's
Yeah.
something that impacts people every day, impacts families, and just had to figure out how to make a difference, and that's what I decided to do.
Yeah, you clearly have absolutely no passion for any of this.
Right. Just a job.
Yeah, just a job. I needed something to do, but no, getting back into serious mode, I applaud you. You saw it's what we talk about in the entrepreneurial world a lot. You see a problem and you work to find a solution, or you found it and you offer it to the public. I don't think this is much different. I'm sure we'll circle back to the whole DEA and really want to get into some of your thoughts on the drug problem that we have in America, and we very well may through our discussion on only 2MG. But you retired and you decided you didn't want to fish and you didn't want to golf, that you wanted to start this business, this non for profit or nonprofit, however you want to call it, only 2MG. So tell us about the passion and the motivation for starting that. Are you looking for a podcast to answer some financial questions? Well, then check out the Mortgage Beat podcast, brought to you by Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. Mortgage Beat gives insight into the home loan process specifically for police officers, firefighters, and other public safety professionals. The podcast is hosted by Police Mortgage CEO John Aritos, who has decades of experience in the mortgage industry. Check out Mortgage Beat on Spotify today.
I love DEA. I had a great career. I had it. I mean, everything was working out right. A really good office, good investigations, good relationships with other agencies. I mean, we people think I'm crazy to retire when I did, but I've always had this passion for teaching and training, and especially my 4 years at Quantico. That really just, I mean, the flame was there, but that really just ignited then. And I knew that I was excited to go back into the field and work in enforcement again and run an office, but I just I knew there was another chapter to write in my book,
Mhm.
and so I walked away, I retired, and started my own training and consulting business. And then that led into a job with the Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center. That's the
Mm,
organization I work for. And there's six of these centers across the United States, and I work for one in Missouri that supports law enforcement in 9 states. The other centers obviously support law enforcement in their geographical area.
sure.
And then that led into my specialty is drug type training and curriculum. And I built a 2 hour opioids class, and it just took off. It just went really well, and I saw a need immediately, not just within the first responder community that who was my initial target audience, but for
Hmm.
everyone. I mean, medical schools, people in the treatment and recovery community. To hear my perspective from my background was unique and was different, and it just took off to where it's a 4 hour. My flagship presentation is now a 4 hour presentation,
Wow.
and
No breaks though.
no
Just
breaks, of
four
course.
hours.
No,
Yeah.
I
You
mean, no sleeping, no on the
no
phone.
sleeping. No beverages.
That's it.
No jokes either.
Very harsh environment there. So it's taken off, and I've actually really proud milestone is a few months ago I did presentation number 100.
Nice.
And I've traveled to 22 states with this presentation, and ultimately that led into the formation of the nonprofit organization Only 2MG, which is 501(c)(3), so it's IRS recognized,
Hmm.
and we're slowly growing. We hope to scale that to where we have more instructors and more of an impact. And our initial focus was initial illicit fentanyl, but we are looking at how we can talk about other emerging drug threats and public health, safety threats as well. So, but I know that my background, my resume will get people in seats, and
Hmm.
if I can get them into the seats and educate them about this drug and the profound impact it's having on this country, then that's a that's a that's a plus. And if I can be a force multiplier, if I can get people to have these conversations in their own homes or in their own communities, then ultimately that's saving lives, and that's important to me.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty ignorant to this subject because not having been a first responder and never had, or a healthcare worker even, haven't had to deal with it on that end. And fortunately I never did drugs, so I never had an interest in doing that. Never had to worry about fentanyl or any other bad complications with it, so I don't know that side of it. So let's dig into, other than just knowing, drugs are bad, what do people need to know? In fact, I perused your website and you mentioned that your business equips individuals with the knowledge and resources needed to prevent harm, protect lives, and empower them to create safer communities. So, what do people need to know in that respect? How do you do that?
Well, we'd start with just the name of the organization, Only 2MG. So that's a very stark reminder that only 2 milligrams of fentanyl is needed to kill the average human being. So think about what 2 milligrams is. We're talking about a couple granules of salt or sand. This can easily hide in a pill, which is a problem. It can easily hide in other drugs like heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine. And we're seeing a large number of people die, most of the time had no intention of taking fentanyl because of this very deadly drug. So, understanding how it's absorbed or how it's found its way into our drug supply, and that the fact that only 2 milligrams is enough to kill you. When you look at just the statistics, in 2023 we lost 107,000 people in this country to drugs.
Mhm.
About two-thirds, which about 75, 80,000 people of that total number was because of this one drug, fentanyl.
Mhm.
Now the numbers aren't out for 2024 yet, and we will see a slight decrease because of drugs like naloxone, Narcan. But we're still losing. One is too many as far as I'm concerned, but we're still losing way too many Americans every year, and people just don't understand how fentanyl has made its way. I mean, DEA has
Mhm.
estimated that it's in 70% of our drug supply. 70%. And if you look at one of the things that I look at is I look at drug analysis reports from our labs, whether it's dope seized by DEA, or whether it's seized by a state police, or a police department, or just your local county sheriff's
Mm-hmm.
office. All those labs, they talk to each other. That's how we look for drug trends, things like that. And what we found, the last statistics we have, about 41% of the cocaine out there seized by law enforcement now contains fentanyl. 17% of the methamphetamine out there seized by law enforcement now contains fentanyl. Heroin, if you can find heroin, there's about a
Mm-hmm.
75% chance it's going to have fentanyl in it. The pills, Percocets, Oxys, Adderall. It doesn't have to be an opioid. It can be just a regular pill. If there's a pill, there's a counterfeit, and we know now through a lot of testing and millions of these pills seized that they contain fentanyl or methamphetamine or some type of garbage. So just sharing the information that this drug has found its way into the majority of our drug supply, and people who aren't looking for fentanyl are getting it every single day and dying. And that's why we lose 200 to 300 Americans every single day, primarily to this one drug.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm gonna ask a very, very I normally don't throw curveballs, but
Okay.
I'll give you unlike most pitchers in baseball, I'll give you a heads up that this is kind of a curveball.
Okay.
Just to give you a perspective. I'm an alcoholic, more than 5 years sober. I saw the problem and
Congratulations. Yeah.
stayed away from alcohol. Obviously people taking illegal drugs that have a problem, I do have a little bit of a soft spot for them, in especially those that want to get help and actually do the work to get help. But for those that don't get help, for those that don't care, why this is a very, very hard question. Why should we care? Why should we care about these people that know, you know that if you're going to jump off a cliff that's 5 stories tall, that you're going to get hurt or die. You know that when you take drugs with fentanyl and everything and you don't change that behavior, you have the possibility, maybe probability of death. Why, as a tax-paying citizen, should I care?
Well, actually, thank you for asking this curveball question. I can't tell you how many, because I talk about this quite a bit in my training. I
Yeah,
can't tell you how many seasoned officers. I mean, a lot of experience on the streets who will come up to me afterwards or reach out to me afterwards and actually thank me for what I'm about to say here. We should care because
please.
you're human, and we should
Yeah.
we should take care of each other, and what way to help people than to actually have some empathy and understanding and help people. Substance use disorder, addiction is real. It impacts
Yeah.
people. Whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. I mean, this is people are struggling, and we should care. And then, if you want to be selfish about the answer, well, then think about all the collateral damage. Think about all the crime and all the
Hmm.
associated garbage that happens because of addiction, right? I mean, what are people willing to do to get money to purchase drugs, or what are people doing because of what's happening to them when they're on drugs? So one of the things that I do actually in my training is we actually talk about addiction. We talk about what
Hmm.
drugs do, how the dopamine release, the fact that, you build a tolerance, the fact that for a lot of people, you eventually build a dependence or an addiction to it, and how it just takes over. And there are
Hmm.
people out there who they don't want to lose their relationships with family or friends. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to overdose. But they'll tell you that the dope sickness, the withdrawals are so bad, they're willing to take
Hmm.
those risks. I mean, that's not a normal thing. That's not a choice people are making. And it always drives me crazy. I was on a very national known program, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and he kept on harping about the fact that it was a choice. It was a choice, and all these people want to do is get high. And I disagree. I can think of a million examples. I think about a young girl that I had known who was molested by family members
Hmm.
and thrown into foster care. It was so bad because the states never want to you know take a child out of the home. It has to be really
Sure.
bad before that happens, right?
Hmm.
So they take her out of the home, and she goes into a foster home that does what? The same thing.
Yeah.
So all she sees is this abuse in her life. She turns to alcohol and methamphetamine, and this wasn't a choice just to get high. I mean, she was running from something. Now, I don't agree with her choice. Her coping
Mhm.
mechanism wasn't the smart uh, reaction to what happened to her, but I'm not going to abandon her. I mean, she it doesn't mean she doesn't deserve our help or our attention.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just not humane. It's cruel. And there are people out there who are struggling. And the fact of the matter is there's a stigma out there. People call you addict, people call you junkie, alcoholic. They use all these terms that, I mean, if you had cancer, would I say, "Hey, cancer, how you doing?" I would never say something like that, right? And
Mhm.
words matter, and we know through a lot of research and just personally talking to a lot of people who are struggling with this, the stigma matters, and it keeps people in the shadows,
Mhm.
and they don't feel like they can be supported. They feel embarrassed. They feel hurt. They feel, you know, like it's going to be a hurdle, and it often is, to get through this, to ask for help. And then when they do, what happens? They get into a system that's typically underfunded, uh,
Mhm.
uh, or just not supported by the public. And it's irritating. It really is. Having a little empathy, having a little understanding to your fellow human being goes a long way. And think about the positive change in this world you can make by doing that. Think about the positive outcome and how you can help a fellow human being by just giving a damn. Just listen. Doesn't mean you have to agree. I'm not saying drugs should be legal or there shouldn't be consequences for the things people do to get drugs or because of drugs. I'm not saying that at all. I think actions demand consequences. But what I am saying is empathy, having a little understanding goes a long, long way.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm driving for. We need to remove the stigma. It's irritating, it is, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but
No, it's a good tangent. No, I agree with at least 80% of it. So go ahead.
like, I always give this example. If 20 dolphins a day were washed up on shore, we would lose our minds, right? I mean, we'd all be texting money to different organizations. We demand our politicians and everyone answer to this and figure it out. But when I tell you that almost 300 Americans are dying every day because of drugs, you know what the typical answer is? They made their bed. It's their choice. Now let them deal with it. I mean, really? I mean, this is incredible. And then it drives me nuts. But yeah, we need to reduce the stigma, and I talk about this quite a bit, and I can't tell you the number of seasoned officers. I always thought it was going to be the new officers, like the young generation of people that come up to me and say, "Yeah, that makes sense." But usually those are the hardened ones. It's usually the guys who've been around the block for a couple
Mhm.
for a couple years or more, or several years or more, who say, "Yeah, you know what? Having a little empathy, having a little understanding goes a long way, and it helps you communicate. It helps you just makes you a little bit more efficient and makes you a little bit more approachable, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on the empathy part. I have a ton of empathy for, somebody that, continues to try to get help. And, I think, while for some there certainly is a stigma, I know from my own experience is, you get so deep into an addiction, whatever that addiction is, and you kind of know, all right, I've got a problem and I need help, and you even start thinking, I want to get help, but I'm so embarrassed that if I come out and actually go and get help, that I'm going to get chastised, people are going to leave me, people are going to say, boy, are you weak, da 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 da. And I will say, especially to anybody that is struggling with an addiction, my fear was very unfounded, because when I started getting help, even people that I had hurt and were a little bit, some little pissed, some very pissed at me, all rallied around me. I didn't lose any family, I didn't lose any friends, I didn't lose any clients. Maybe there were a couple of comments here and there that were very, very light and vague. But I didn't lose anybody.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So, I understand the thought of, well, if I come out as this addict and say I need help, that all these people are going to abandon me. And I can tell you, at least from my own experience, that really doesn't happen. And frankly, the few people that may actually say there's something wrong with you are probably people you don't need in your life anyway.
Absolutely, right?
I love what you said too, about even if you don't care about these people, which you should. I think that, for people especially that, should and could and want to get help, that they deserve that help out there. But I also love what you said is the crime that's involved with it. That I truly believe, and this is somewhat of an unpopular concept sometimes, is that I believe that all drugs, alcohol, prostitution, and gambling should be 100% legal throughout the country, and the government should just do what one of the few things that they do best is regulate the ever living crap out of it. Uh, because if you're offering it to people, then you can regulate it. There's no fentanyl. You can put the cartels out of business. Granted, that's kind of pie in the sky because people would always go for cheaper stuff. But I think that that is a really sound argument. You get the drugs out of your community, you put the drug dealers out of business, yeah, and crime logically goes down.
Well, the problem, the pushback I would give is I mean, like, look for marijuana, for instance, in some of the states that it is legalized. We see a lot of organized crime. We see a lot of activity by the cartels, not the elimination of the cartels, but actually an increase who are involved in some of these legal ventures, or
Mhm.
they're putting their marijuana into these legal ventures. And then let's say you tax the hell out of it. There's going to be someone else that comes around the corner and says, well, I can get it
Yeah.
cheaper, and then you look at states like Colorado who, they now, that was the whole thing, right? Tax it and use the money for public health or whatever. For this last several years, they now spend more money in the state of Colorado on what I call the collateral damage than they actually make in tax revenue.
Mm.
So, increased hospital visits, traffic accidents. I mean, just the crime. People are still going to commit crimes to when they can't afford drugs, regardless if it's the government's paying or selling it, or whether it's you or me selling it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's an interesting argument, and I, I would push back
Yeah.
respectively.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you know what? That's the first thing that I think of is, okay, so great. I don't even know what drugs cost because that was never my problem. I always went to the liquor store, the bar. But if one pill costs $100 and now it costs $300 because it's legal, but the government is providing it, you're like, yeah, I want to go back to that $100 one that's still illegal because I don't want to spend that much money. And the blunt fact is there is no quick fix. There is no easy solution to this problem, regardless of how you go down that road.
Uh, Well, I think the quick fix, and it's not quick. You're right. There's no quick fix. This is a complicated issue. I think the focus note needs to be on reduction of the demand. I mean, this is
Mm-hmm.
this is when it comes down to it, really, it's an economic issue. If you have a supply that
Mm-hmm.
demand, right? And we've seen that historically in this country, well, in any country for that matter. But when it comes to drugs in this country, we've seen that. Um, we make up in the United States, we make up just over 4% of the world's population.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we consume the majority of drugs in the world. Why? So yeah, I don't like drug traffickers. Yeah, I don't like the cartels. Yeah, I don't like the chemical suppliers in places like China who are sending these chemicals to places like China, like Mexico to make mass produce,
Mm-hmm.
methamphetamine, fentanyl, et cetera. Big pharma, they have a hand in this as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is a demand problem. If we have to
Mm-hmm.
reduce the demand, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so invested in educating communities, especially young people, is because I really believe that we can. prevent drug use through education. I've met a lot of kids. I think about, you mentioned you didn't use drugs, neither did I, and a big part of that was because of the constant, hey, this is what they do to you. This is,
Mhm.
this is how they can hurt you or the people around you. And then I started to see that as a young person. And like I said, that's what ultimately drove me towards this career. But point being is does it work for everyone? No, everyone can hear the message and still go out there and or use or abuse these substances.
Mhm.
But we do know that it's information that's needed and that there are a lot of people, especially young people, who will take this information and hopefully make good decisions in life because of it.
Yeah, that I agree with you 100%. Being a business guy, that's just basic economics. If you have no demand, then the supply or suppliers go away because at the end of the day, they want to make money. And if nobody wants what you're selling, then you close up shop.
It's 101, right? It's a
Mhm.
simple concept and that's how drugs work. And unfortunately, too many of us want them.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I'm all for you on taking care of that demand. So I guess the question is, from a first responder standpoint, because most of our audience we're privileged to have are first responders and police officers. What do they need to know about fentanyl and drugs, and maybe to do their part, not only on the back end on the empathy part, but also on the front end of maybe taking care of that demand and lowering that a little bit.
Yeah, the empathy for sure. I really do think that matters. Most police officers, 99.9% of the police officers and first responders, not just police officers, but first responders I talk to, understand that being around fentanyl is not going to kill you. You're not going to overdose from being around it. But I think it's still important to address, and I do address it when I train. I think it's important for us to talk about it now. Is there's this misconception out there. There's a myth that just being around fentanyl, touching fentanyl, breathing fentanyl is going to create an overdose or the potential for death. And we know now that that is not true. I love DEA. I had a great DEA career. In 2016, DEA put out a officer safety alert and uh, public safety bulletin talking about the fact that just being around fentanyl can kill you. I mean, it basically says your eyes are going to blow up if you look at it. I mean, it doesn't say that, but it's how you feel like when you read it.
Sure.
And then we immediately saw the videos out there of the officers who were dropping just from being around it. And to date, none of those have been confirmed in toxology reports as fentanyl. And they have organizations have done studies and research. I mean, you can breathe this, you can touch it. Now, I don't recommend breathing it. I don't recommend touching it. I mean, obviously, I'd want first responders to use common sense and use, PPE. For me, it's
Hey,
nitrile.
what is this? Let's taste them. Let's taste more of this. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you hear the stories, right? But I wear gloves. I wear nitrile gloves when I'm around any drug, for that matter. And I use some common sense. But in the event, let's say my club tears, or maybe you're in an undercover capacity, and and I've done some undercover work in my career. You're not wearing gloves. You're touching this stuff, right?
Hmm.
So I think just understanding that fear is just a fear. There's no truth to it. I can remember early on when I started to really talk about that, I had an officer who who actually talked to me offline after the training, and he said that the first couple of years at the police department, he was very aggressive and loved getting dope and really had
Hmm.
a dream of working in narcotics or maybe even going to the DEA. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. Where's this conversation going? And he said, after the scare of fentanyl, my department made all types of changes. We weren't allowed to do presumptive drug testing. We had to be really careful around it. And I get that. A lot of departments to this day still have policy in place that really makes it hard for officers to be around drugs. But he was afraid that he was going to die, that he was going to overdose. So he just stopped. I mean, he just stopped. And this was a pretty aggressive young officer. And after our conversation, he still had a couple doubts because this is something that he'd heard of quite a bit. And but he did his own independent research and he talked to me some more. And that same week when he called me the second time, again, and he took 600 counterfeit oxys off the street, and
Mm.
they came back with fentanyl in them. And I think, man, look at all the fentanyl you just took off the street,
Yeah.
all the potential people that got saved because you armed yourself with accurate information and yet continue to do your job knowing that you would be safe and having the confidence to do that. So yeah, so even though most officers I talk to know this stuff,
Yeah.
um, it's still important to talk about. And the other thing I realized that the few that do push back on me are typically supervisors. And it's interesting, and I have a theory is most of these folks were probably line officers back in 2016, 2017 when all this
Mhm.
information was going out there. And they have since promoted in their agencies and they've never re-educated themselves, right?
Yeah.
They're captains or chiefs or whatever. And and all they know is what they learned when they were on the street. So
Mm.
that's my crazy theory, and just based on the fact that the very, very, very few, I mean, I probably trained, gosh, at least 5,000 first responders in just fentanyl alone last year. And I only had pushback from I think two, and
Hmm.
they were both supervisors, great people, obviously concerned about their people and want to keep people safe. But um, again, the bottom line is just being around this stuff is not going to kill you. Take
Yeah.
precautions, use common sense, wear gloves, do whatever makes you feel safe. But in the event that you do have a contact, you're going to be okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I applaud you for what you're doing and what you said. Ignorance is a real killer, and knowledge is the best way to take care of that. So I appreciate you putting that out there. As we begin to wrap up a little bit, and this is, more for my edification, and this isn't meant to be, a political conversation. But one of the reasons us podcasters do podcasts is because we want to learn about stuff that we don't know about and don't do. I know, here in 2025, the administration, whether you like them or not, is doing a lot of what I'll just simply call anti-fentanyl acts, whether it's to secure the border, or to tell Canada, hey, stop this crap from coming in here, or to call the cartels a terrorist organization and so forth. Yeah, is from somebody in your line of work that has retired DEA, that has basically dedicated his life to anti-drug and helping people in this area. Yeah, is that the right direction? Are we doing the right things from that standpoint, or are we missing something in that type of strategy?
We are absolutely doing the right thing. I'm not political. I run an organization, so I have to be real careful to be apolitical.
Yeah,
I don't care what people's thoughts are on this current president, whether you like him, whether you voted for him. But the reality of it is, sometimes he's right. Sometimes
hmm,
he's wrong. I can say the same thing about
sure.
Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton. Go down the line for the last 100 presidents. You can say that. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. In the issue of fentanyl, he's doing a good job. Can he do more?
Hmm.
Yeah, certainly. I'm excited about the border. What I have seen at the border is the ability for our people and our resources to focus on drugs, to focus
Hmm.
on criminal activity. We know most of the illegals, the migrants crossing the border aren't carrying drugs. That's the reality of it. They're just not carrying drugs. Most of the drugs come through the same port of entries that you and I would travel to and from Mexico with. But now, as opposed to running around catching the illegals, now they're focused on the drugs. They're focused
Hmm.
on, like I said, the criminal activity, and we're actually seeing a increase in drug seizures along the border. March, we saw significant increases in all drugs. Why? Because they have the time and resources. That's a good
Yeah.
thing. So I'm hoping that the pressure with Mexico ramps up. I it's been on the news a lot lately about whether or not we should have troops on the ground. That's always been an interesting story there. They've always pushed back because they're a sovereign nation. They really want to take care of
Hmm.
this problem themselves. But I know the last 6 years under their last president, I'm talking about in Mexico, under AMLO, it was really difficult for U.S. law enforcement to do a lot down there. I mean, they were really taking our information, they were funneling it through basically one source,
Mm-hmm.
and that made it really difficult because of the corruption, because of the abuse down there. And we're starting to see those channels of communication open up, and that's a good thing. We're seeing Mexican military along the border. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The more we can do to prevent drugs and other criminal activity from crossing the border, both ways, by the way. We have a lot of guns that go south, so we need to stop that
Mm-hmm.
as well. That's good. The one that a lot of folks aren't talking a lot about is the de minimis loophole. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
I'm not. No.
Uh,
Tell us
so
about it.
so just a Reader's Digest version of it. So back in 1938, we created this loophole. It's called the de minimis loophole. And what we did is we put a figure on any package imported into the United States, and it was $1 in 1938. And any package valued $1 or less that was imported into the U.S. went through either minimal or no inspection. It had no, basically no tax, tariff, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
That would allow, let's say you're you're with your family in Australia and you want to send something back to the US. I mean, it'd be
Mm-hmm.
silly to open up all those packages and tax you. Well, over the years, 1938 was a long time ago, right? So over the years, that threshold grew and grew and grew, and then all of a sudden, 2016, some idiot decided to make it $800.
Mm-hmm.
So that means any package shipped into the United States from anywhere, if its declared value is $800 or less, it went through again minimal or no inspection, plus there was no payment.
Mm-hmm.
So this got so out of hand in the United States. We had almost 4 billion packages last year shipped into the U.S. that met this threshold. So we're talking about 3.5, 4 million packages every single day. And this was and this is killing a lot of industries. I mean, uh, people that make clothing. I mean, the number of counterfeit clothes, purses,
Mm-hmm.
shoes. I mean, not just the drugs. I mean, just
Sure.
killing a lot of industries in the U.S. But I know in 2023, Customs and Border Patrol decided to, and I'm sure they did this last year as well, but I haven't found any data. But I know in 2023, they started opening up random packages. And guess what they were finding? Fentanyl,
Drugs.
drugs. Yeah, or counterfeit shoes or whatever, and then they started to backtrack these to country of origin. 62% came from China.
Mm-hmm.
62%. And then you look at China's threshold, when we send them packages, it's either $7 or $8. Anything
Mm-hmm.
we send to China that's valued at $7 or $8 or more, we have to pay a tax on. So, a lot of people can criticize Trump. And again, I'm not political. I could care less what
Sure.
people like or don't like, but this was the right thing to do. As of May 2nd, he's closed that loophole with China. And I'm hoping Congress can act in a bipartisan way, because, I steal this line from Derek Maltz. He was the acting administrator for DEA. He
Mm-hmm.
stepped down a couple of days ago, but he always says this isn't a red issue or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. And I wholeheartedly agree
Mm-hmm.
with that. This is good for America, not only to reduce drugs and other, uh, you know, illicit items, contraband coming in, but just in general. It's hard to do business when you're competing against a country that can just flood your market with counterfeit or crap items,
Yeah.
not even paying a tax for. It's ridiculous. So that's another thing that he's done over the last couple months. Again, I applaud him. I hope he does more. I hope this isn't lip service. I'm actually seeing action. He did say to a lot of folks that families that were that have lost loved ones to fentanyl poisoning,
Mm-hmm.
that he was going to take action. And I guess that's one thing. He's a he's a man of his word when it comes to, what he's going to do. But I know he's divisive. I know he polarizes people. But we can get behind some of these things. You can hate the guy all you want, not vote
Mm-hmm.
for him, but you can actually support when we're trying to make the cartels and the criminals' jobs a little harder. Not a bad thing.
No, no, I don't always agree with him either, but one thing as an entrepreneur is I like action. Do something. We could always change it later on, but inaction in my mind causes a lot more issues than action. And it always surprised me that all these drugs and illegal things come across into our country from China without a problem. But the one time, when my wife decides that she doesn't want to buy from our Amazon account and says, "Oh, this dress looks really nice and it's coming from China," that we just don't get it. But drugs keep coming in without an issue, so I don't understand. I don't understand that dynamic. But Brian, I literally could talk to you for another hour. I've learned a lot in this very short conversation, and I really appreciate it. Before we let you go, for those folks that are watching or listening that say, "Hey, I want a Brian Townsend, in my community to talk. I want only 2MG to come and give, that 4-hour presentation without breaks at my police department or agency." How can they best find you out there?
To be clear, we give breaks and we give donuts. Okay.
Oh, donuts. So,
No
so,
donuts. I'm actually
so,
kidding about the donuts.
so
So we
you
do give
agree with
breaks.
Trump, but not RFK Jr. is basically what you're saying. But
That's
anyhow,
right.
please continue.
That's right. So my website or our website is at only2mg.com. So it's ONLY 2, just the number, it's not spelled out, and then MG, which again stands for milligram.com. So you'll learn more information about what we're doing, my schedule, what we offer. We currently offer 3 classes. We offer the I call the flagship program, which is the 4-hour program. Maybe donuts, maybe a couple breaks if they're good. And then we offer a 1-hour lunch and learn. That was actually originally developed for executives. I was working with some organizations in my other venture, Eagle 6 Training, and they were interested in learning more about fentanyl and illicit drugs, but they told me I don't have 4 hours. We came up with a lunch and learn, and it's interesting. I've never been able to get through the entire PowerPoint. They get so fascinated, and I've actually had
Mhm.
several of them say, "Okay, we are ready for that 4-hour conversation,"
Yeah.
which is great. But that's an hour, and then I have one I call Shattering Dreams, and that's a 1-hour presentation I do for young people. I've primarily been talking to college students, but I have talked to as young as fifth and sixth grade,
Nice.
and a lot of high school as well. So we're a nonprofit. We don't charge organizations to bring this training unless they can pay us. Uh, that's a good thing if you can, because
Mhm.
if you can't, then I have to find the funding, and unfortunately, the grants are difficult to obtain right now, and
Correct. Yeah.
people just don't like to donate to things like this as much as they do other, the dolphins that are washing up ashore.
Mm.
I don't say this to brag, but I fund a lot of the stuff that I do through my pocket because I don't want to not have this conversation. If you tell me that you want
Yeah.
to have me come to your location and you don't have a budget for it, I'll find a way. Eagle 6 Training, my for-profit business, I usually just take all the money there and pay for my nonprofit because I really truly believe in what we're doing, and I'm trying to make a positive difference in this world. And if I can inspire, impact people in a positive way, and again, make them force multipliers where they take this information back into their homes and back into their communities, then it's worth me paying for the airfare or a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. I know a lot of people out there appreciate it. Keep on doing what you're doing and decrease that demand to zero. I particularly like that you're going to the fifth and sixth graders. I was actually thinking, they should probably start with junior high on this, but maybe that's too late for some. But Brian, thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate the time, and yeah, it was a good conversation. Thank you.
Well, pleasure was all mine. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you,
go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.